Hey there. Thank you so much for being here today and for joining this conversation about building a solid foundation for parenting in the digital age. My name's Ryan, and I get to spend a lot of time talking to parents and kids. And one of my favorite things to talk about is this place where parenting meets technology. This video is going to be most beneficial to those of you that are right at the edge of this journey. You're about to enter the world where your kid is going to be stepping into technology, and you're looking down the path, and you see some hurdles coming your way, and you want to start now. You want to start now with an early foundation that sets you up well as a parent. The older and older your kids get as they utilize more and more technology. And I'm right here with you. I have 3 kids at home, 9, 6, and 3, and my oldest is right on the edge. He can't wait to get his first social media account. It's a challenging time to be a parent for sure. It's a nerve-wracking time. And so thanks so much for being here. Thanks for leaning into this stuff. It's my hope that after spending some time together today, we're going to walk away as more confident parents. Yes, the road looks bumpy ahead. It looks challenging, but you can do it. You can do it. You can be the parent your kid needs you to be. And so let's jump in. I want you to think back to that very first cell phone you got. You remember that cell phone, right? I remember holding it in my hand. The technology blew my mind. I could connect and talk to people so quickly and easily. And it was probably the most groundbreaking piece of technology I'd ever laid eyes on. Now, at that moment, I gave no thought to how this small device would affect my parenting someday. I wasn't even a parent yet. And the truth is, we are trailblazers today. Especially if you have young kids, right now you are truly finding your way forward. And it's something that no set of parents before you has ever really had to do to this level. The world, of course, is changing around us. Technology is changing. And it's not all bad. But the thing is, it leaves us as parents with lots of questions. The stakes are high for our kids. Technology is not going anywhere. So our ability to help our kids navigate successfully as they grow up and as they develop and as they get more and more into this is critical. The foundation is critical. And so as we enter this conversation, it might be helpful for you to think back. And I want you to think about the fact that the same social motivation that drove you to beg your parents all those years ago for that phone in your room, you remember that? The one with the long cord? Yeah. That same social motivation is what drives your kids to lean into social media today. A helpful way to think about it, I think, is for me to think back all those years to the school cafeteria. You remember that place, right? The cafeteria has always been a place for the important work of identity formation. Where do I sit? And with whom? How are we all dressing these days? What are my peers up to after school? How do we express ourselves? And how do we remember the good and the bad experiences we come across every day? Thinking about it through this lens, a kid swiping through their social media Instagram feed doesn't seem so strange. In fact, it makes a lot of sense, maybe even for us, as we swipe through our social media feeds. It's like looking around the lunchroom, asking those important questions, who am I? And I want to point something out right here. Your kids will make mistakes. I mean, you made mistakes, right? You made mistakes, you crossed lines, you tested boundaries, and our kids can't learn to make good decisions on their own if we don't let them fail or make mistakes once in a while. Now, if you're like me, letting our kids fail makes me feel like I'm failing as a parent. But truly, our goal is not to look like successful parents. Our goal is to guide our kids to be responsible, upstanding citizens someday, responsible adults. Now, I'll admit, out of context, letting our kids fail, that sounds really bad, totally bad. But I'm not talking about a no rules, no boundaries strategy for raising our kids. I'm talking about something totally different. You see, when it comes to the strategy for raising our kids, there's a contrast of 2 words that I think really helps bring this into perspective. And those two words are simply involvement and investigation. But here's the thing, these words are similar, but one of them will drive you, and I promise them, nuts. And the other will position you best to influence your kids as you navigate this tricky, technology-filled world. You know, I know that keeping our kids safe online or in the digital space can sometimes feel like following 10 steps behind our toddler as they cross the busy freeway. The idea of completely helpless comes to mind. And I think the difference of these two words, involvement and investigation, could make all the difference for us. So let's talk about investigation first. Investigation makes me think of waiting around to catch our kids making a mistake. I think wiretaps, stakeouts, informants, right? We suspect they did something wrong from the start, and we set out to investigate and catch them in their mistake or their misstep. In my opinion, the trouble with investigation as a strategy is that it requires almost near 24/7 attention. That's exhausting as a parent, and I'm tired enough already. And worse yet, I think it's ineffective. Even at our best, how could we seriously hope? How could we seriously hope to stay up on all the new, let alone old platforms, apps, features? It doesn't mean we throw our hands up and set no boundaries at all or set no limits and hope our kids turn out okay. Not at all. We have to use tools like common sense media, filters on our internet, solid parental controls. But instead of investigation as a starting point, we need to go out of our way to lean into the other word. You see, when it comes to our approach as parents, I think the second word, the far more appropriate word from investigation, is involvement. Not awaits to catch me, but rather spends time to get involved with me, to discover what's important to me. The word involvement implies to me something far more relational, far more personal. It's not someone who waits and watches to catch me, but rather someone who knows me enough, knows and is involved enough in my life to know what I'm doing. It's someone who's involved in my life enough to set age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate guidelines and guardrails to protect me. And these guidelines, these guardrails grow and adjust with our kids as they grow and as the situation demands, but it's our involvement in their life that allows us to make the appropriate adjustments. I think there's three primary areas of focus when it comes to this word of involvement. And I want to run through those with you right now. First is help them evaluate. Kids need help evaluating. Is content or material or maybe even a conversation on their phone or on a platform, is it appropriate? Coach them ahead of time. Help them understand how to evaluate things when held up against your family values and what your family thinks is important. Second is help them know how to react. Our kids, unfortunately, will come across inappropriate material. So talk through the language, talk through the actions that would be appropriately used when that happens. When our kids come across that material, make sure they know how to react. Number three is help them feel safe. Have honest conversations, safe conversations often with your kids. Make sure your kids know that it's safe to talk to you. From the start, the more normal you can make these conversations, and I promise you they're going to be a little awkward at the beginning, maybe all the time. Okay, let's be honest. But the more comfortable your kids are talking to you about this stuff, the better it will turn out when the stuff really comes up. And I want to point out something really important here. When a kid feels safe to talk to you or to build that safety, when kids do fail, and they will, nearly all the weight of what happens next for your relationship is resting on your response. Your response in that pivotal moment when you find out information, what your face and your tone and your language and your body language even communicates will strengthen or erode the safety and comfort your kids feel coming to you. Now, this doesn't mean no consequences. This doesn't mean that you won't have to take steps after you find out what you're about to find out. But your reaction in that split-second moment is so important. There's a word that I want to unpack, and it's the word called trust. And there's two people that I want you to trust. First, I want you to trust in them, and I want you also to trust in yourself. So let's talk about trust in them first. Because we're afraid of what our kids will stumble upon, we often jump to restrictions as the first line of defense. The response comes from a really good place, a well-informed place even. Restrictions can be super helpful in giving kids a sense of where a boundary is. For example, an age-appropriate cell phone contract would be totally appropriate before you hand your kid a cell phone. Or perhaps setting screen limits for your kids would be an appropriate use of boundaries and guardrails and restrictions. But I want to point out that as good as they are, a restriction can also be a sort of double-edged sword. When a child or a teenager stumbles upon something unintentionally, something inappropriate, those restrictions can often cause them to want to hide their behavior for fear of losing their device or fear of the consequences that might come their way. So I think a great rule of thumb to start is trust them until they give you a reason not to. Don't start from a place of mistrust. Next is trust yourself. You're the parent. You remember when you were growing up and your parents had a hunch or they would do some investigating when something just didn't seem right. Nothing's changed. An empty pack back then in the trash or a lighter in the back of a drawer, the cues for you today are there. So trust your gut as a parent. Trust yourself when things seem amiss. And pursue your concern. But pursue it in a way that fights for your relationship. At the end of the day, the pitfalls of the digital world are enticing, and our kids need us. Our kids need us to give them good guidance, good guardrails as their parents, so trust yourself. Another important foundation is our communication. Because again, it's not a matter of if, but when our kids will be exposed to inappropriate content. So I just want to play out this. Make sure that you have maybe some role play for toxic situations. Again, it could be really uncomfortable, but it will pay dividends in the long run. What will they say? What will they do when faced with those situations? And it's important to note, when you have those conversations, it's not what the family at school or the family down the street values. It's what does your family value? Do you know? Can you articulate? Can you articulate it before something happens so that when you're in the middle of it, you and your family are responding in a way that lines up with the values that you share? Like I said at the beginning of our time together, the foundation we lay now, the foundation we find ourselves laying in these early days of parenting as it meets technology are critical. The relationship we have with our kids, the safety they feel talking to us, the growing trust, and the sense of growing trust they have in us is vital. And I promise you, you're going to have good days and bad days. The road to parenting is bumpy. But when it comes to social media and technology, you can do it. Stay focused on what matters. Stay focused on the relationship you have with your kid. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Thanks for watching, and thank you to Teen Esteem for letting me come and just spend some time unpacking this with you. If you'd like to watch more helpful videos like this, I'd encourage you to visit teenesteem.org, and there's a whole library waiting for you. I think they'll be very helpful. Thank you so much for being here.